everyone, and welcome to Anything But Bland, where we talk about business, community, and everything in between. This is a Bland Associates podcast. I'm KRiskowski.
And I'm Ashley Postaway. Welcome back to the show.
Yes.
Kaylee, I'm really excited for today's episode.
Me too. We have one of my team members, one of my people I spend a lot of my time with at Bland here today to just give us a lot of good knowledge and information. So
you might be wondering, what's the secret sauce behind a thriving business financial wizardry? Well, you're in for a real treat because we brought in an expert who has all the answers.
The expert.
Allow me to introduce our extraordinary guest who has years of experience in empowering businesses to reach their full potential through effective budgeting and forecasting practices. Bob Dick, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Yes. Thank you for coming. Bob, will you give us just a brief background on yourself?
Well, I have been in public accounting for 35 years, and it's been a wonderful ride, and I have more years to come in the future.
Love to hear it.
That's good.
Love
yes, I feel very grateful that Bob, as you mentioned, he has 35 years, and he's imparted a lot of his knowledge and wisdom in myself and our team, and so he is someone we are very lucky to have at Bland. He works really hard. I know that because I'll get emails from him late at night, and sometimes he'll think I work late, and then I'll get an email that's even later, and I'm like, he's older. He's supposed to be sleeping.
That's right.
But Bob, when you do have spare time, what do you like to do?
My baby is 15 years old, so right now we're just chasing him playing basketball. He's 6'4" and
holy cow,
does a lot of basketball, so just running and doing that.
Nice.
Very good.
My son is 4, and he's at basketball camp this week.
Sweet.
Yeah, I love basketball.
Yes, good sport.
It is.
Okay, so this episode probably could span several hours.
For sure. So especially because Bob's a talker. But we're going to keep
had
it.
to drop that in. For anyone that knows Bob, they will think they are in for an audio book today. But this is really just
high level
introduction to the topic. And then if you want more information, like we always say, please reach out. We are here to just kind of get wheels turning and impart some knowledge. However, the depth and all of the one-off scenarios and different circumstances that you might have is probably worth a separate meeting to really understand what Bob's going to share with us and how that relates to your business. So if you want more information, please do not hesitate to reach out.
My contact info is always in the show notes.
Yep.
So, all right, to get started with our first question, how can businesses create a realistic budget that aligns with their goals and objectives?
One thing that I've seen over the years is that business owners will start their business, but they really don't have a plan. And that's where the budget comes into play, is that you really need to set your objective of, do we have a total revenue in mind? What do we want to accomplish? And at that point in time, you have to determine what are your goals. And you set those goals from a financial standpoint on a periodic, maybe it's every 2 or 3 months or every month, and trying to use the goal setting process to obtain those objectives. And a lot of times what happens is that you say, okay, we want $1.5 million in revenue, or some people might focus, I want $300,000 of net income. And net income would be, for example, if you have 1.5 million of revenue less 1.2 of expenses, you get this 300,000 because you want that 300,000 to live on. And so really the budget can be used as a tool to obtain that objective. And the goals are kind of set, trying to, every month you're evaluating your goal of, am I meeting my budget?
And by them working with you, you help keep these along, on track.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, because it's really part of helping them establish a budget. A lot of times we're helping our clients establish a budget because we understand where the expenses should be, and we can't control the revenue, but we can come down to a level of, as accountants, as experts in the business fields, as we can determine what should your expenses be.
Right. Mm-hmm. Nice.
And so an important part of the budget, to Bob's point, is figuring out what those revenues and expenses are going to be. So Bob, talk to us a little bit about how a company can try to forecast revenue and expense.
Yes. Once you've been a year into it, we'll just assume that you've been a year into it, is to really try to lay out what your revenue stream is on a monthly basis. Many businesses are cyclical or seasonal. For example, some businesses might do very well from March through September, but not so much October through February because they're a landscaping or a mowing company versus other businesses might do well because of contracts that just happen over the winter months. And so really you just need to look at that monthly stream of income and then try to determine what are your goals for the next year. Because it's not always, I'm going to increase revenue. It might be that because of labor issues or some things, you want to keep your revenue about the same and then adjust your expenses accordingly. And for some, it might just be, if it's year over year, it's the same amount of revenue, you might just give an inflation factor and call it good. But anymore with the labor issues businesses are having, you really need to evaluate on a monthly basis where those revenues are. And then correspondingly, you look at your expenses.
Is there a way that they can monitor and track their actual performance against budgeted figures and then adjust accordingly?
Yes. So it's really important that businesses have some kind of a financial software, whether it be, just as an example, QuickBooks, which is generally the most popular, or Sage, or maybe you're using an Excel spreadsheet. But it's really important to lay out your revenues and expenses on a monthly basis. You know, we've had some clients that have come to us for help, and they do it every 6 months, or they do it every 3 months. They look at their bank statement and
Try and remember what happened in the past. Like,
Right.
that's hard. Running a business,
exactly
like
right.
you don't want to be doing that.
Yes. And so it's really just try to get something like a financial software so that you can, on a monthly basis, put in your revenue, put in your expenses. Because one of the things that happens is that a lot of times businesses need to have an understanding of how particular jobs work. Some businesses are very good at, I know I made X revenue, my expenses were X, this is my profit margins. But a lot of businesses don't.
No.
They have no, I talk to people just in meetings and things, and a lot of business owners don't really have an understanding of that last job you bid for $10,000, how'd you come in?
Oh,
And that's where the budget comes into play of tracking things historically accurately and correctly so that you can say on this $10,000 job, did it cost me $8,000? So I made a little money, or did it cost me $12,000?
and you lost them.
Yes. So it's really important to, I've been working with a couple of people somewhat as a mentor and trying to help him understand to track his proposals, all the wins and the losses. So, okay,
The importance of it.
Yes. Yeah, you know, I've made 10 proposals and you've only you get 6 of them. You lost 4 opportunities, and try to help them understand that's part of the budget process, is that what kind of work are you getting? And then trying to understand, can you find out why you didn't get those 4? I mean, are you competitive, or are you coming out ahead? You know, there was a guy that he underbid the next person by almost $10,000. It was about a $35,000 job, and everyone else was $15,000 above that.
Yep.
So I try to help him educate. It's not really part of the budget, but this is a business perspective of budgeting for that. Okay, we're going to be more aggressive with our revenue estimate because we're going to bid up the jobs a little bit.
It's nice to have you around for that, because I feel like as a business owner, you're just overwhelmed with all the daily to-dos and the monthly to-dos and all the stuff for the business that you kind of forget about why it's important to track that. Like, you're just like, okay, I did this proposal, done. Didn't get it, okay, on to the next, instead of the importance of tracking it, like you said, so you can see what you need to do to improve, or what you didn't do, what you forgot to do.
Yeah, so once you establish the revenue on a monthly basis, then it's also very important to understand the expense side. And usually your prior year expenses is a good starting point, but too many people will just take their annual revenue, divide it by 12, and annual expenses and divide it by 12 and say, here's my budget. But some things, for example, insurance, you might only pay on April and September every 6 months. And there are expenses that have the higher months of revenue because it's seasonal, so your expenses should be higher. And there are times where I've looked at clients or potential clients, and they're just taking this, dividing it by 12, and it's just not realistic. And
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, how often should they meet with someone like you to look at their budgeting and forecasting? Is it every 3 months, 6 months, twice a year?
I think it depends. I mean, some clients we work on a monthly basis
Okay.
with, just kind of as a CFO services, where we're helping them oversee the financials because they don't necessarily have an accountant. But other people, maybe it's just on an annual basis if they just
Hopefully they're keeping good
Yes.
track records of everything for you, for your benefit or whatever, so you don't have to go through all that and comb through it all.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. And it just really comes down to, we always make recommendations. I think it's very important to say, look, let's revisit this after 3 months. Let's
Okay.
revisit this as 6 months. It's up to them, but it's very important in today's business world that people understand their expenses and where they've spent too much money or too little money.
Right.
And just as a quick example, I was reviewing someone who was a plumber, and his insurance I knew what I was paying for insurance. This is about many years ago. And he was way overpaying, and just health insurance costs. I knew he had 6 employees and was just totally out of line. And I found him someone, and we saved him about $12,000 to $15,000.
Oh my gosh.
Just because he was paying different health insurance company, but there were better, more efficient options for what he was doing. And those are the types of things that we can help identify.
That's why it's nice to have someone like you, because if you don't know what you don't know. And
right. You just have your blinders on and you're just focused on your
you think you have the best
business.
deal.
And,
yep. That's awesome.
Okay, so Bob, you have Ashley and I convinced of why we should create budgets if we were to own our own companies. But if you were going to give us a persuasive and convince the listeners of why they should budget and forecast and what those benefits are, what would you say?
I think one of the biggest benefits of a budget is I truly feel that people that have a budget and try to adhere to that budget have a truly better understanding of their cash flow. Cash flow is king in most situations. And if you've budgeted, to go back to my example of making $300,000 net income, and your revenue is on the budget to make that $300,000, but your actual revenue is trailing the budget, then you need to make changes. And unless you have a budget, you won't necessarily know to make that $300,000 bottom line, I need X revenue every month and keep my expenses in line. And it's for decision making, it's so critical in today's world that you have to have money for taxes, especially if you're an S corp and from a tax anything, partnership, whatever the business format is, that you have to be able to have a budget so that you know you're going to have enough money to pay taxes, to pay yourself. Some people might take a very minimal salary and take what's left over. And a budget helps you control all of that, because a lot of times people, well, I need 150,000, but then in the year they get 75,000 and they wonder why. Well, I've had that conversation many times. Just in those examples, it's like, well, it's because your revenue fell off here and your expenses increased here. You didn't have a budget. If you're looking at that budget, you need to have a monthly budget. So you should compare your monthly activity, your actual monthly activity, to your actual or your budgeted activity on a monthly basis, but then also year-to-date budget and actual. Because sometimes your revenue might be down in 1 month, but over the next because your job just carried over multiple months. Some of your expenses are not necessarily going to carry over because they're just regular routine. So the biggest benefit of a budget is to have better information for decision-making and knowing, can I afford to buy a piece of equipment? Can I afford to start a new line of business? It's all relating to the budget. If you know your budget, you know your operations, the budget helps you make better decisions.
For sure.
Yeah. That's huge.
I feel like it can go business or personal, this whole budgeting and forecasting for yourself personally and for your business.
Truly, it is an important, I think, financial management tool, like you said, personally and professionally. But Bob just brings up other things that I think, like taxes and you yourself, and what do you need to pay yourself to cover your own living expenses, and that, if you're a business owner, is going to be generated from your business income and what the take home is. And so there's just so many factors to think of. And I think as you hear Bob elaborate on it, you can hear how just experienced he is. He's obviously seen the full spectrum of budgets. He and I have worked on really large budgets before for really large organizations that have a lot of different service lines and expenses and things going on, all the way down to a simple entity. And either size, either type, it's all just so important and critical to reach the goals, the financial goals that Bob mentioned earlier. Bob, any kind of final closing thoughts on budgeting to share?
I think just to reiterate, I think budgeting is one of the most important parts of budgeting is for decision making. You can make far better decisions for your business if you know your budget is your expectations. And it's people always say, do I meet expectations? Just treat your budget as an expectation. And are you meeting your expectation? It might be that you're taking too much time off for vacation or just goofing off and you're under revenue. So if you see that budget number and your actual revenue is below that budgeted revenue number, psychologically, you might tell yourself, all right, I need to make some more phone calls. I need to go out and make more bids. I passed on a couple bids because they were too small or too large or whatever it is. So just treat your budget as an expectation. And the question to ask yourself, am I meeting my expectation?
Yeah, that's great. I
That's a
love
good
that.
final
Yes,
closing.
closing. You guys, Bob is such an orator. We were joking with him earlier because he will get up and speak to hundreds of people all the time, and he was a little nervous to come speak
But you
to
can't tell. You did great.
Yeah, he did great, and I love that final closing thoughts. So, Bob, thank you very much for coming on. We truly appreciate it, and I know the listeners will appreciate it as well.
Yes. So if you guys want any more information, you can find my information, my email in the show notes. And if you have any questions for Bob, feel free to send them over to me, and then I will get Bob involved, and we can get those questions answered for you.
Absolutely.
Also, when we share this podcast, we'd ask everybody to like and review the podcast so that we can build up our podcast followers and reach for everybody. So please share it, and if you do, you will be entered in to win some awesome swag from Bland.
Tell them our IG.
Oh, yes. I always forget this. So you can find us on Instagram at Bland Accounting, as well as LinkedIn.
We're
and,
cool. We're
yes,
young.
yes,
We use Instagram.
IG, the gram.
I know Bob's got a big Instagram following.
Yes, he does. 1.4K.
Can't keep this guy off social media.
Oh,
I'm like, Bob, will you please use your LinkedIn? Like,
we need your peeps to help.
yes.
Oh, my gosh. Okay.
All right. And then you can also visit our website, www.blandcpa.com, if you want to hear more about our firm and our areas of expertise and just the different ways that we can help you. So,
Yes. We also, a little shout out to my marketing team of one. Me.
Yay. Yes.
We do have a new website, so go out and check it out, blandcpa.com.
Yes, big kudos.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for tuning in. We are excited to bring you this podcast, and we think this information that we shared today will help you do future budgeting and forecasting for yourself and your business. So,
Absolutely.
So friends, be informed
Be inspired.
and be awesome. Bye.
A Hurrdat Media Production.